What is up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, hi, my name's Erin. I'm a registered dietitian and I help my clients break the cycle of dieting by teaching them to nourish their bodies well. And today I'm going to teach you how to develop meal planning strategies that are super easy but super efficient. So, when we are talking about meal planning, and I want to specify here that meal planning is slightly different than meal prep, right? So, meal planning is just what it sounds like. It is pulling a plan together for your meals. Now, you can make a plan to meal prep, right? So, meal prep is the actual preparation of the food that can be done in advance, it can be done every day. But the plan is more of the plan, and the prep is more the execution. So, for meal planning, I think probably the biggest problem or the biggest struggle I see a lot of my patients have is that they don't plan, right? And they constantly want me to write them a very detailed meal plan, which I'm happy to do. But as that old saying goes, if you teach a man to fish, if you give a man a fish, he will eat for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, he will eat for a year or a lifetime or whatever the saying says. So, my goal here is to teach you all how to fish, right? And it really doesn't have to be as complicated as people make it out to be. um, Depending on your goals, you may want to first calculate your calorie needs. The very last video on my channel goes over exactly how to do that. Some people just focus on calories. Other people focus on calories and what are called macronutrients, which are your proteins, your carbohydrates, and your fats. Some people don't have a particular desire to pay attention to any of those things. They just want to have kind of a general healthful diet. So my goal today is to teach you how to do that. You can absolutely make that work within your calorie goals and within your fitness goals. And we'll talk a little bit about how to make that work towards the end. But for today, I'm just going to teach you kind of how to balance your various meal components. The good news in it is that there is not one way to do this, right? You can make multiple different types of plans that all get you to the same end goal. That said, one of the most challenging parts of this is that there are multiple ways to do it, right? So a lot of times where people really struggle is that there aren't always hard and fast rules. That is good because you can, modify it to make whatever you need it to do. So whether you have kids, if you're preparing meals for a family, if you're not preparing meals for a family, if it's just you, if you're you work days, you work nights, you work weekends, no matter what your schedule looks like, you can find a plan and a strategy that is going to fit it because they are completely customizable. That said, it also creates a lot of wiggle room. And I think sometimes people get lost. So today, my goal is just to simplify that and kind of give you a few basic steps on how to kind of pull together and build your own meals. So to start out, the biggest thing when trying to plan your meals, whether it is an individual meal, whether it is your meals for the day, or it's your meals for if you're really, really ambitious and it's your meals for the week, the biggest thing you want to think about is balance, right? And when we think about balance, we tend to think about our food groups. So I'm going to pull up our little plate here, and everybody kind of hates the plate because they think it's overly simplistic. If you're old like me, and this is new to you. This was once the food pyramid. Okay. So when I was in school, it looked like a pyramid. There were like carbs and starches, I think, at the bottom. Fruits and vegetables were in the middle. Meats, I think, were at the top. And then like sugars and added fats and things like that were above that. We have taken largely the same information, right? So I want to be clear that like the food pyramid, as simple as it is, it generally honestly does do a very good job of teaching us nutritional balance. What I like about it is that it breaks it down into food groups that most people can kind of comprehend, right? So most people kind of looking at this plate know what these food groups are, right? We know what fruits are. We know what vegetables are. For the most part, people know what proteins is. Those are going to be things like our meats, but they can also be things like legumes, like beans, nuts, and seeds, even like meat alternatives, like tofu and things of that nature. Even some dairy products, so things like cheese, for example, do have quite a bit of protein. eggs, fish, etc. So those are going to be our proteins. Our grains, I usually compare grains and starches, I kind of lump them together. So grains are technically anything that's made with a grain. So that is going to be anything made with wheat. So baked goods, breads, pastas. It's also going to be things like rice and quinoa. Corn is actually considered a grain, as is, things like potatoes and starchy vegetables like that. I consider those, kind of the grainy starches. They are technically vegetables, but nutritionally they fit with the grains and the starches. Um, and then there's dairy. So dairy, to be clear, is anything made with cow's milk. So it could be milk, it could be ice cream, it could be yogurt, it could be cheese, or anything that is a plant-based alternative to those things. So things like almond milk, soy milk, hemp milk, cashew milk, any variety of ice cream or yogurt made with those things, lactose-free, milks and cheeses and things of that nature. So the plate is very simplistic. And I think people think that it oversimplifies, but truly it doesn't. To be honest with you, nutrition is not nearly as complicated as the world wants to make it. So I actually like the simplicity of it. That said, we present this plate very often. And when I say we, I really mean the USDA, who is the creator of the plate. You can view more about it on that recipe. I'm sorry, on that recipe, on that website down below. But really the plate teaches us that we just want balance. So they present it as, you want your plate to look like this 3 times per day, right? And it certainly can, right? There's nothing wrong if with every single meal, we assume most people are eating 3 times per day. It doesn't necessarily have to be 3 meals, but most people should be eating something at least 3 times per day, if not more. That said, it does not have to look like this pretty perfectly portioned plate. It's okay if it does. That's great. That's admirable. But it doesn't have to be that way. So what I usually tell people to do to start is I tell them to start tracking. So you can use like a fitness tracker, something like, your Fitbit or MyFitnessPal, or Lose It is another great app. But I like to actually simplify it from there. So I make a very simplistic chart for my patients, and we have all of our food groups. So these are the same food groups that are in the plate. And then we have the days of the week, right? And our goal for the most part is to get 2 to 3 of everything every single day. You certainly definitely want 3 proteins per day, and you definitely want at least 3 grains per day, probably more. Dairy, and I realize this is spelled incorrectly, but dairy in adults is arguably less important if the other 4 food groups are maintained. So we definitely want to make sure we're getting at least 3 proteins, at least 3 grains. And between fruits and vegetables, you don't necessarily have to do 3 of each. I usually tell people aim for 4 to 5 between the two. So that can be 2 fruits and 2 vegetables. It could be 1 fruit and 3 vegetables. It can be 1 vegetable and 3 fruits, kind of however you want to break those 2 down. These 2 are very nutritionally similar. So a lot of times I tell people to just kind of aim for, about 4 of them between the 2. It does not have to be 3 of each. And that's really it, right? So when you're pulling this together for your meal plan, let me pull another document up here. Bear with me. I thought I had it pulled up. So it can look a little something like this. So this is just a very, very simplistic sample menu that I will also give my patients sometimes. But basically we have, as you can see, there's only 3 food groups per meal. And now I want to be clear that this is not a prescriptive diet. This is not a specific calorie diet. This I literally just use for teaching patients the same way I'm teaching you all right now. So this is not necessarily something that I'm recommending per se. I'm just showing you that this is how it can be broken down. As you can see, all of these meals and snacks, not a single one of them contains all 5 groups, right? And that is perfectly okay. As you can see, the breakfast only contains 3 groups. So it has a protein, a dairy, and a fruit. But because we didn't get the grain with the breakfast, I'm adding in a grain as a snack. So it's kind of and it goes back to this little tracker. think back to the food groups that you either did not get with your last meal or will not get with your next meal. So, for example, a lot of people don't eat vegetables, just as an example, with breakfast, right? So, you want to make sure that you get a vegetable for lunch and a vegetable for dinner to make sure you're hitting that 4 to 5 servings per day, if that makes sense. Um, Similarly, like I said here, we did not get a grain. So I'm making sure that we're getting another grain in the snack. And we also have a grain with lunch. So we're getting our 3 servings for that through the day. And then you just kind of pick and choose. Again, planning those meals and snacks around each other to make sure you are getting this balance throughout the day. Um, what some people like to plan out their whole day, but you also can plan in that. If you wanted to do that, you would just plan your meals and snacks very simply and then kind of add them all up and tally them. Or some people like to just do it meal by meal. But again, thinking back to those groups, thinking back to what have I eaten, more importantly, what have I not eaten that I need to make sure that I get in my day. And with that, that is it. So, if you are interested and want copies of any of this information, I'm happy to provide it. They're free and downloadable on my website, which I will link in the notes. But other than that, I hope you found this information useful. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Also, please hit that subscribe button, and I will catch you guys next week.